But in case you just joined us, this is KBC News Check. Thank you so much for making time. And as I had alluded to earlier, is that we are splitting these 2 hours. First, we are talking about matters security and terrorism. Then the second hour, we're going to be discussing matters politics, and this will fall squarely on peaceful elections in that second hour. Well, in the next 3 days, the country is going to be commemorating exactly 3 years since the Dusit D2 terror attack along Riverside Drive that left over 20 people dead, and Al-Shabaab militias did come out and talk about that they were responsible for that terror attack. What are some of the lessons that we have picked from there? And with all fairness, we have enjoyed relative calm, and especially in the capital city. Yes, of course, we have some of the issues on our borders, and especially because of Somalia and the Al-Shabaab militias, but at least we have enjoyed relative calm. What are some of the things that we are doing right? What are some of the things that we need to do? You do remember the head of state, President Uhuru Kenyatta, did say that security starts with you. And my guest on this hour, he is a senior superintendent of police and also the principal liaison officer at the National Counter-Terrorism Center, Kilu Masisi. Have I got to that?
Yes.
Karibu sana. And thanks
for
making time and being my first guest.
Thank you for having me here.
Yes.
Happy New Year, viewers. Good morning. So,
yes, you are a senior superintendent of police, and also you also wear another hat when it comes to matters counter-terrorism. Kindly tell us a brief of what you do.
I work for the National Counter-Terrorism Center. The National Counter-Terrorism Center is a multi-agency instrument that is comprised majorly of security agencies from government, MDAs. So at the National Counter-Terrorism Center, you will find we have the police, we have members from the intelligence, we have the KDF, we have immigration, we have Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have Ngao, so we have the prison department, we have the KWS. So it's a conglomerate of government agencies who deal with security. And the purpose of having that is to have coordinated efforts among the security agencies. So as a police officer, I'm seconded there, and I'm the principal liaison officer. And the NCTC, as those who will not know what NCTC does, NCTC coordinates counterterrorism efforts across Kenya. NCTC sensitizes and creates awareness across Kenya. NCTC also capacity builds enforcement agencies on matters of counterterrorism. And also NCTC in liaison with other agencies, they do certification for aviation schools. As we know, the plane has been used as a terrorist weapon.
Yes.
So it is good that we vet these schools so that you can know the intention, who comes there, who are the pilots, who are the students in those schools, so that we can have a secure, safer space for the aviation.
Okay.
Yes.
And 3 years down the line, what lessons have we picked up from the Dusit D2 attack? I remember government agencies were on the receiving end because it was alleged that the US had issued some sort of a warning that the Al-Shabaab militias were planning an attack on somewhere that is frequented by tourists and people from other countries.
Yes.
What lessons have we been able to pick up since the Dusit D2? Of course, a very unfortunate event, but we may have picked 2 or 3 things that we can use to ensure that that does not happen again.
Yes, we have lessons learned. The attack was very unfortunate, although we know our security agencies are very resilient in matters countering terrorism. So in the last 3 years, maybe we can go up to what happened in Westgate, issues of coordination.
Yes.
And we see there's an improvement of coordination
True.
in the enforcement agencies. We see there's an improvement of awareness, because in this awareness we also tell the larger society what to do in case of a terrorist attack. And you see in Dusit, you could see what the civilians did, and then you could see also what the enforcement agencies did. You could see the first responders, how they reacted, and those who came in after the first responders, how they acted. So we have learned that it is good that we bring the larger society, and we are calling it a whole of government, a whole of society approach, so that we face issues of security wholesomely as the whole of Kenya. Yes.
And matter security are kind of a lot of secrets involved, so that we know, of course, you can be able to prepare well. But what are some of the efforts that have been done since the Dusit D2 attack that guarantees us, or me as a Kenyan, that I'm safe within the borders against any terrorist attacks?
Yeah, of course. You'll find that there is no secret. You just say that there are warnings or advisories given by our friendly countries on their citizens who are in Kenya. So number one, that is not a secret. So when they give these early warnings, we always analyze what is the threat level, what is the situation on the ground. And we have different parts of Kenya. So we will say a certain part of Kenya is quite safe, a certain part of Kenya is volatile, a certain part of Kenya is vulnerable, but as enforcement agencies, there is what we are doing to ensure that the safety and that people in Kenya feel safe. So there are enhanced capacity building for enforcement agencies, who are the first responders, who are our frontline officers in these vulnerable situations where an attack happens and they are the first ones to run towards the attack, as opposed running the opposite direction of the attack. So there is a big plus for our enforcement agencies who actually respond fast to these incidents. Again, we have done a lot for the society. There is what we call the county action plans. The county action plans are driven by the governors and the county commissioners, where the governor is the chair and the county commissioner is the co-chair. In that forum, there is what we call the County Engagement Forum, which is comprised of many people from that county, from the business sector, education sector, security sector, who come together to put their brains together and see how they can build resilience in matters countering terrorism and also countering violent extremism, especially matters of radicalization and recruitment to these terror groups. Yes.
And talking about fast responding, looking at Dusit D2, there were already some warnings.
Yes.
Looking at how we responded to the Garissa University, it took a lot of time.
Yes.
And looking at how we also responded during the El Ade attack, we could say we are a little bit slow when it comes to fast responding to some of the attacks that we've had.
Yes.
What is the center doing to ensure that now it's quite snappy, such that in case of anything, even if it's an advisory, we act and act right? Because some families argue, if at all there was a warning, this thing should not have happened.
Sure, of course, we are not 100% in this response. As a center, we have tools that we are using to ensure that the coordinated effort is not perfect, but as good as it can be. For example, we have what we called ACT, and ACT is Action Counters Terrorism. So these are tools that we use to highlight issues of terror, and we speak to members of the society, members of the county security intelligence committees on what actions they can do to counter terrorism. We have another tool, it's called RADAR. RADAR is RADAR. It's a risk assessment decision-making tool. So, of course, when we get the warnings and we have persons of interest, we use this radar to see how committed the person of interest is in issues of terrorism. And of course, again, we also see you might have an accused person or a person of interest, and you want to exonerate them from that act of terror. They could have been a taxi driver who was innocently just doing his job, but happened to carry some terrorists along doing his job. So we use this tool to also exonerate such persons. So again, we do what we call CTSECO. CTSECO is counterterrorism security coordination, and this is for big events. This one we do assessment for an event prior, during, and after the event. We also do security assessment for institutions. We can do security assessment for KBC as an institution. We have done security assessment for most of our universities. We have done security assessment for our ports, our airports, and other would be targets for terror attacks. So there's a lot we have done, and also the sensitization that we do alongside using these tools. So there is a lot we have done since DUSIT, and we can pride ourselves. We have our inputs, and we are seeing our outcomes, and of course what the safety that the Kenyans are enjoying. Yes. So at least we can comfortably say at least we as a center, we have at least achieved something since its establishment in combating the rapidly changing terror world. Yes. And if you look at the legislation, the center is established by the Prevention of Terrorism Act, and we have a mandate in that act. And there's what we have done before DUSIT, and there's what we have done after DUSIT. So if you look at what we have done after DUSIT, it's really a lot. And there are efforts that we continue coordinating and performing to ensure that Kenya remains safe in terms of terrorism. Yes. And you've mentioned something, you've done is it risk assessment for security risk assessment for even universities? Yes. And universities are emerging as very, very fertile grounds for radicalization. Yes. And we have seen even in some of the attacks, some being students of the university. And they can blend very well as learners, but they are terrorists. How are you combating that, and especially radicalization in the border counties, including Mombasa and Lamu, where the cases seem to be a little bit higher? As I said earlier, we have the threat levels that we have. We look at counties differently. Every county has their priority. So if we go to the county action plans, there is what that county prioritizes. Maybe I will speak a bit on the national strategic plan on the countering violent extremism. So it's called the NSCV. So the NSCV has what we call the strategic end goals. It has the strategic priorities, and it has the strategic pillars. So in terms of the pillars, we have political pillar, we have the security pillar, we have the education pillar, we have the gender pillar, the role of women and men and children in terms of countering terrorism. We have the psychosocial pillar, the ideological pillar. So we have about 9 pillars, and we are also looking at the victims of terrorism. What happens to a mother of a terrorist when the terrorist is no longer there, when the terrorist is jailed? What can we learn from the mother? What are these telltale signs that we can pick from these victims? So alongside doing the security assessment, we also sensitize on issues of radicalization into violent extremism, who are the vulnerable groups, and in universities, we form those CT champions so that they can be able to pick up these early warnings, and then we can have the early interventions in such. Yes, it might not be in the public domain, but through that sensitization, we are able to pick elements of terror, and we are able to contain them in our institutions of learning. In the frontier counties, we have concerted efforts, the multi-pronged approach, the whole of society, the whole of government. And as you said, the president said, security begins with you and me. So we want to build that resilience from the societal point of view, so that the enforcement agencies, these people live within us. So if we get the information from the society, then we as enforcement agencies, we are able to perform our duty perfectly.
Okay.
Yes.
And looking at technology, it has changed the whole world.
Yes.
And of course, terrorists are using the same technology
Yes.
to further their cause.
Yes.
And looking at propaganda that they usually use on social media,
Yes.
on their websites, on their Facebook pages, how as a center are you able to perceive that threat and able to neutralize it before it gets out of hand? We've seen Al-Qaeda using social media. We've seen Al-Shabaab doing the same. We've seen the Taliban back since when the technology started.
Yes.
They have been using technology and social media to further their agenda.
So again, the National Strategy on Countering Violent Extremism, we have a pillar on media and online.
Okay.
And in that platform of media and online, we bring the media players, and also we are aware and we appreciate the strength of social media. The strength of social media in terms of it can be an advantage and a disadvantage. The world has become a very small village. The Al-Qaeda will use the platform to air their narratives, to air their incidents, trying to encourage people to join them, to recruit them, to radicalize them. But we have platforms where we follow the social media. Again, for the mainstream media, I'm sure you are aware that we have done training for media personnel on how to report on cases of terrorism.
That is true.
So that you don't seem to be encouraging people to join terror groups, but you are reporting against the terror groups. So media and online is really a challenge. If you look at the COVID period, where schools were closed, and we were learning online. So we had to come up with strategies of what are our children consuming online. We are the ones who have put the Wi-Fi in our homes, and our children are busy at home. So what are they consuming online? Are they consuming violent extremist materials? And if we get these materials, what do? Do we delete it? Do we give counter narratives, because we know there are those narratives that they are given by the radicalizers and the recruiters? So we are doing efforts on counter narratives, of course deleting this material from online when we access it, and also keeping up with the times, because we know if you don't keep with the times, you'll be left behind. We have the citizen mechanism support in our center. The citizen mechanism support also on a day-to-day basis. They are online looking at trends, what is happening, what is being done online, so that we can have those intervention measures that can really enable us to check on the social media. Yes.
Okay, now looking at what we've gone through, I remember the head of state, President Uhuru Kenyatta, did talk about security begins with you and me.
Yes.
And earlier on, I remember we were having a conversation with you there, where when you get home drunk at 2 in the a.m., the neighbor will be like, alifika saa 8 usiku. But when thugs come and steal your things and he's asked, did you hear anything or anything? Apparently, it is so becomes that the neighbor never had anything.
Yes.
The same way that the terrorists themselves, you cannot look at me and say, yeah, he looks like a terrorist. Yeah, they live among us, and telling people, reporting this or people giving out information that they know about this person,
Yes.
they kind of, a lot of people shy from that, and that breeds grounds
Yes.
for this terrorism. As a center, how do you ensure that people are able to come out and talk about security and talk about this person is my neighbor, but I'm not quite comfortable with some of the things he's doing? How do you include that as well?
Thank you for that question. Yes, and we had discussed about the Lamu issue, and what the center is doing through the sensitization. We are trying to encourage a resilience theme. See something, say something. Don't just report your neighbor for coming home drunk at night.
Yes.
Report also what happens in terms of security, because you're the ones who see, and when you see, you say something. Of course, there's a perception that the police or the enforcement agencies will not be very positive or will not take up that issue very positively. And we know of the police reforms that are ongoing and the perceptions that we want to change with the reforms and all that. So we actually know these people live amongst us. They have gone to Somalia, for example. The proximity of Lamu and Somalia makes it very easy to infiltrate the county of Lamu. The returnees who are there are members of the society. So when we are creating awareness and sensitizing members of the public on issues of radicalization and these telltale signs, we actually tell them, this person was available some time ago. 3 months, you've not seen this person. The person is back. He has a certain behavior. Will you report that to a chief? Will you report that to assistant county commissioner? Will you report that to the village elder who will scale it up to the enforcement agencies? And that is what we are trying to encourage. That if you see these telltale signs, we know there are the stereotypes who will see a beard like mine and say that I look like a terrorist.
Yes, yes.
But we have seen people without beards who are terrorists.
Yes.
And we are trying to demystify that issue of stereotyping. The face of terrorism, we are seeing terrorists from Busia, from Mumias, from Kakamega, you see? So it cuts across. Terrorists are coming from Nyeri. So it cuts across, and without stereotyping, there is what we are looking at. So that a neighbor would say that this neighbor of mine is behaving fishy. I think he's acquiring terror materials. I think his behavior is leading towards something that is not good. Then we take it up. So we're encouraging that if you see something, you say something. And it is better that you see something and say something, we investigate and find out that there was nothing. Other than you seeing something and not saying something, and then later something happens and you start saying, oh, I had seen this, I had seen this. So it really becomes a challenge. So we are trying to encourage the society to be patriotic and to be as resilient as possible, and when they see something, they say something.
Indeed.
Yes.